What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto got a demon girl pregnant? And she wanted to raise their child in the underworld. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description box to original creator of this beautiful creation. War is, well, most people call it hell, but hell is surprisingly not that bad, all things considered. It actually is a lot like the mortal realm. Only key differences are a red-hued sky, and some more mountains. But there are forests, prairies, plains, and oceans. Now, heaven on the other hand. And now I'm getting ahead of myself. War. That's where we were. War is terrible. It rips families apart, pits brother against brother, and is one of the worst things that can happen at any time. Worse still, there are people who love war. They thrive in it, relish it, and cannot get enough of it. It's even worse when these people are in charge of countries or governments. But it's particularly brutal when these types are the leaders of entire races. The biblical battle of good versus evil was true. For a time, the biblical God and the biblical Satan duked it out. Only, it was more of God versus Satans, the plurality being key. The four great Satans, Lucifer, Beelzebub, Leviathan, and Asmodeus combined their might and fought with their creator, God. The wars heaved heavy tolls on both of the sides, and it was during the tenuous peace that a third faction was born, the fallen angels. Fallen angels were sick of waiting for God to make a move against his enemies, so they attacked for him. However, this angered God, and he refused to let them back into his kingdom ever again. The fallen angels, still retaining their holy abilities, continued to fight against the devils, but also turned their hatred towards heaven for abandoning them. While flying, a flash of red, brighter than the blood on the ground, caught his eye. Looking down, he saw a woman with long, red hair that fell to her ankles. She was garbed in the black and red armor of Lucifer's top-ranking members, a sturdy full-plate top with chainmail pants, with the standard of Lucifer branded on the red cloth hanging from the waist of the plate. In her hands was a spear of pure black, its large, obsidian tip glowed with a purple energy. Her violet eyes were trained on him, and the shaft of the polearm was in her petite, gauntleted hands, with the glowing tip pointed directly at him. A blast of the purple energy was fired at Manato, but he dodged out of the way, his wings giving him superior aerial maneuverability. Eyes narrowing, he dove towards the woman who dared attack him. She fired several more blasts of devil energy, all of which were evaded easily by the mighty angel. When he was within 50 feet of the devil, he raised his sword arm behind him, the sword igniting in powerful flames. With a cold look, he brought the blade down on the woman when he was within striking distance, bearing down on her spear, which was raised in defense. An eruption of fire proceeded to climb high into the sky and radiated outwards from the impact, scorching the earth, and turning the bodies of the fallen to ash, nearly instantaneously. Manato's eyebrows raised in surprise as a black, spherical barrier encompassed the devil in her entirety. Her smirk told him that she wasn't as surprised as he was, as she pushed back against his sword, offsetting his balance and gaining a bit of ground between the two. Then the clang of weapons meeting rang through the air. Manato tried to gain ground on her, but with his cleansing of the area, she had ample room to use her acrobatics to maneuver. With her spear's obvious range advantage, he was unable to get close enough to land a blow on her, while she kept thrusting and parrying his strikes. It didn't help that the flames that were launched from his swings were nullified by her barrier, keeping her at the advantage. The exchange kept on for many minutes, each trying to gain a purchase on the other, yet nothing was working. Finally, a break for Manato occurred. His opponent tripped a little on a protruding rock. Seizing the opportunity, he used his wings to propel him forward, closing into her guard. However, she reacted just as swiftly and they both ended up with each other's weapons at their throats. They stayed locked in the stalemate, their eyes burning into the other's. They stayed locked for 10 minutes before either one spoke. "I should kill you right now," Manato said as he stared at her eyes. "If you so much as move an inch towards me, I'll cleave your head from your shoulders," her voice lilted with ferocity. Quiet resumed, and the stalemate endured for another 10 minutes. "Your leader is going to be destroyed," Manato intoned, his voice full of assurance. "Oh please. Lucifer knew of you, that's why I'm here," the woman commented. Manato raised an eyebrow in curiosity. "Oh? Is that so?" His opponent's eyes widened. "You weren't supposed to hear that." Forget I said anything. A chuckle erupted from Manato's throat, before he felt her blade press closer to his throat, so he did so with his to her neck in return. Don't laugh at me, Loki, she sneered, clearly unpleased with being laughed at. Manato, the blonde man corrected. What? She asked with narrowed eyes. Loki is my title, my real name is Manato. If you're going to address me, I prefer to be called by my given name, Devil. My name is Kashina, you bastard, the redhead snarled. That's a nice name, Manato complimented, noticing her blush a bit. That's a strange weapon you hold. HMPH. My obelisk is pretty much the Achilles tendon to your flaming sword. It was created by Lucifer, Asmodeus, Leviathan, Beelzebub, and myself, Belial. Kashina smirked at the blonde. So Lucifer has made another great Satan, has he? I am his right hand, just like you are God's left hand, she explained. Manato gave her a deadpan look. Who knew it was so easy to get information from a devil? What's that look for? Kashina asked with narrowed eyes. You're pretty chatty for a devil, Manato remarked, causing Kashina's eyes to widen in realization, especially to an agent of God like me. Kashina looked put off. So what? I'm new to having all this information, alright? Manato's gaze softened somewhat before he started talking again. Let's say we make a deal? What kind of deal? Kashina asked as she gave him a pointed stare. A heavy sigh was heaved by Manato. I'm tired of all this fighting. All it's doing is causing pain to everyone. It's a lose-lose situation. So I want to stop the bloodshed. I propose that we lower our weapons at the same time and we leave. What? Just walk away, live to fight another day. Maybe this will be the change in the flow of battle that brings about the end to our long-suffering conflict, Manato clarified. Kashina looked torn. She worried her lower lip with her teeth before questioning Manato. How do I know that if I lower my weapon you won't just kill me while I've got my guard down? I'm an agent of God. I cannot lie. Deception isn't in my nature, Manato said, his face hiding nothing in his statement. Kashina searched his face, looking for any deceit, but could find none. Okay, so how do we do this? She asked after a good pause of consideration. On the count of 3 we lower our weapons. Oh, Manato started. Wait, I'll count down, Kashina said, wanting a measure of control. We'll do it together, Manato compromised, getting a nod of satisfaction from Kashina. In unison, as if they had rehearsed it, they counted to 3, 1, 2, their voices rang out. Then with a final 3, they both lowered their weapons and took a step back from the other. Manato gave a relieved smile, which was mimicked by Kashina's. They awkwardly stood, facing each other for a couple of agonizing seconds. So what now? Kashina's soft voice asked. We go our separate ways, Manato said, sheathing his sword on his hip. Kashina placed her spear behind her back before straps appeared over her shoulders, securing the weapon in place across her back. I was created to oppose you, Kashina said quietly, causing Manato's attention to be focused on her once more. I'll always be able to find you on the battlefield, and we'll be destined to clash. Manato gave her a charming smile. I prefer a beautiful woman like you as opposed to a hideous man as my counterpart. His statement caused Kashina to blush and fidget, as she nervously tucked a strand of her long, red hair behind her ear. You know, that's a really enchanting color of hair. It's simply the most beautiful red I've ever seen, Manato said, his inability to lie causing him to say exactly what he meant. Thank you. Kashina trailed off in embarrassment. Manato unfurled his wings in preparation to fly. May we meet again on friendlier terms, Kashina Belial. Yes, I hope so too, Manato Loki, she replied with a soft smile as a demonic circle depicting a spiral surrounded by symbols like a sun appeared at her feet. She swiftly disappeared into the portal, with it disappearing soon after. Manato smiled at nothing, and with a mighty flap of his 12 wings, he rose into the air. He didn't notice that his wings had lost a little bit of their luster, and seemed a bit more muted. Over the course of the next few hundred years, the wars raged, and Manato and Kashina clashed, half-heartedly. Each encounter leaving them separating amicably, and Manato's wings losing more and more of their luster. This continued until the day that Manato finally lost his wings' entire luster. It was the week following a small scuffle, nothing major, no lives lost on either side, and the landscape remained green and lush. Manato sat beneath a tree on a hilltop overlooking a shimmering lake. The land of man was certainly beautiful. Manato sat, still garbed in his armor. The flaming sword was sheathed at his hip, and his wings were hidden, making him look as a human. A very pensive expression was on his face, and it looked like he was having an inner battle with himself. "A silver for your thoughts?" came a familiar voice in his right ear. Turning to look at the voice, he saw Kushina, a beautiful smile on her face, still wearing the same armor that she was wearing the day that they met. He smiled and patted the ground at his side as an invitation, which Kushina took, taking her obelisk off her back and laying it on the ground beside her as she sat next to Manato, closer than he had expected. "It's been a while, Kushina," Manato remarked with a smile. "A whole year. I'm amazed that it took so long for any sort of combat to break out," she said with a cheery smile. Both shared a small chuckle, before sitting in companionable silence. Manato returned his gaze to the lake, getting pensive again. Every once in a while he would steal glances at Kushina, taking in her beautiful looks and happy expression. A small gust of wind passed through as he was looking at her, causing her hair to blow gently, haloing her profile a bit, enhancing her beauty. A small blush dusted Manato's cheeks as a soft smile crossed his face. Kushina turned to him fully, staring at him intently. "Okay, you keep looking at me. It's obvious you want to ask me something, so just ask," she commanded bluntly. Manato was taken aback a bit. Well, I mean, he tried and stopped several times before finally sighing and steeling himself. "Hypothetically speaking, if we were both human, how would you feel about me?" What? Kushina asked, surprised. She had not been prepared for that. "I mean, if we were human, no wars, no conflicts, no angel obligations, no devil obligations, if we were on equal grounds, how would you feel about me?" Manato asked, a deeper blush coating his cheeks. Kushina blushed too, hers a much deeper red. Well, if we were human, I suppose we'd be really good friends. I mean, I feel like you know me as well as I know myself, and I feel the same about you. I mean, we might even be closer than that if we were human." "You mean a couple?" Manato asked, his heart beating erratically. Kushina nodded, her voice failing her. She was surprised when she found herself lying flat on her back, looking up into Manato's eyes. He was over her, his left leg between her own, and his hands were on either side of her head, but not on her hair. Manato?" she stuttered out in confusion. "One more question. What if we were still devil and angel, and instead of fighting, we just quit the battlefield, leaving behind both of our factions?" he asked, his face getting closer until his forehead rested on hers. "What are you implying, Manato Loki?" she asked, using his full title because she was a little frightened and confused. "I'm implying, Kushina Belial, that we run away together. I believe that in these 200 years that I have known you, that I have fallen quite madly in love with you," he said. Kushina's eyes widened at his confession, before tears started welling at the corners of her eyes. With all her strength, she pulled Manato closer so that their bodies were flush against each other, and her lips crashed into his, hungrily. He returned her fervor with his own, and soon, they started tearing at each other's armor, discarding it. Hungrily, the two grasped at each other. Hours later found both angel and devil cuddled up against each other. A conjured blanket was all that covered the pair. Their nude bodies lay in the soft grass. Kushina was using Manato's chest as a pillow, and his right arm was wrapped around her, his hand idly playing with her long, crimson tresses. No words had been spoken between them as they had made love. "What happens now?" Kushina asked, a little fearful of the future. Manato was silent for a minute before giving her a small hug. Now we're on our own. Neither one of us can go back. It's just you and I against the world. Can we do it? Can we really keep our lives hidden from the three factions? I believe so. And if we can't, we still have the power to stop anything that comes our way. I'll be your sword if you'll be my shield, he said as he glanced at her. She leaned up on her elbow and gave him a soft smile before caressing his lips with hers. I'll be your shield until the end of time. And I'll be your sword always, Manato replied, closing the distance between their lips once again. It was this day that Manato's wings turned black as pitch, and he regretted not a single moment of it. If humans could find happiness in another, why couldn't an angel? 400 years the wars raged on. During that entire time neither Manato nor Kushina were seen. It had been rumored between the factions that they had died, both succumbing to wounds sustained by the other. Higher-ups in the chains knew the partial truth in that they both had quit the battlefield. But, regardless of the opposing faction's strongest fighters, the wars raged. And it was during an enormous battle that the unthinkable happened. The four great Satans collided with God in a battle that nearly annihilated the earth. And it was during this battle that both sides sustained numerous lethal wounds, and from those wounds, Lucifer, Leviathan, Asmodeus, Beelzebub, and God perished. The power vacuum that occurred in the devil community caused a ceasefire. It was from this that the current structure of devil hierarchy was formed. 72 clans who had immense power rose to prominence as the governing bodies, the 72 pillars of hell. It was soon after the formation of the pillars that a divide occurred. A new war was waged, this one purely of devils, the Satan faction, who believed in continuing the previous four great Satans' plan of overthrowing the kingdom of heaven, and the anti-Satans who wanted to live in peace with the fallen angels and the angels. It was a hard battle that lasted 2 decades. In the end, the anti-Satans won and the Satan faction fled to the edges of the underworld. From this battle, 4 new great Satans were elected by their peers, each carrying the titles of the previous great Satans. The first was the hero of the underworld, Sears's Gremory, the next successor to the Gremory clan, now known as Sears's Lucifer, the most powerful devil in the underworld. He was joined by his longtime friend and rival Ajuka Astaroth, known as Ajuka Beelzebub. The heiress to the Sea Tree clan, Seraphal, inherited the title Leviathan. The last of the 4 was a relatively unknown, Falbium Glaciolabilas, who became the new Asmodeus. It was during the new reign that a truer peace reigned, one in which battles were between individuals and not armies. It was during this time that Manato and Kasha reappeared. And it was obvious as to the reason why. Kasha was pregnant. It came to be that Kasha tried, and succeeded somewhat in contacting the new leaders of the 4 great Satans, and Manato contacted Michael, the archangel who stepped up to run God's kingdom, and Azazel, the leader of the fallen angels. A meeting was set up, trying to convince the factions into a true peace, one where their peoples would not have to know the horrors of war that Kasha and Manato had. On the day of the meeting, there were numerous political snafus that were perpetrated by all the leaders. Azazel was the only one of the fallen to show up. Sears's and Ajuka came, representing the underworld, and Michael had sent Abaddon, a general more ruthless than Manato had been, and his subordinate, Uriel, a powerful woman who followed Abaddon's word as if it were God's. The atmosphere in the room was tense to say the least. They were seated at a round conference table in the house that Kasha and Manato had built. Clockwise from the top it was Azazel, Uriel, Abaddon, Manato, Kasha, Sears's, and finally Ajuka. The silence was broken as Abaddon cleared his throat. I do hope that there was a reason that we were all called here, Manato. While it is nice to see old allies, he trailed off, staring heavily at Azazel and Manato himself. Yes, there is a reason, Manato confirmed. I just thought it was more prudent to bask in the fact that this is the first meeting between the 3 factions. We've come a long way from the wars. What is it exactly you want to talk about? Ajuka was the one to ask. Kasha lowered her head and caressed her slightly bulging stomach. We want to talk of the future. The future where mine and Manato's child will be born. What about it, exactly? Azazel questioned, resting his cheek on his left hand, elbow on the table. We want a true peace. One where there is no more fighting. One where we won't have to worry about our son's future, Manato said resolutely. HMPH. You should have thought about that before you conceived a child with a devil, Abaddon's gruff voice dripped venom. Please, there's no need for hostility, Sears's said, trying to defuse the situation, but Abaddon did not relent. Reveal your wings, Manato, he commanded, rising to his feet, followed by Uriel. What? That's not important, Manato tried to deny as he and the rest of his guests tried to steer the conversation back to diplomacy. Show me your wings, Loki. Abaddon shouted, unfurling his 12 pure white wings. Reluctantly, Manato allowed his wings to appear to those gathered. Only his were the complete opposite of his former ally. Are you satisfied, now, Abaddon? Abaddon continued as if he hadn't heard Manato. You're not fit to be making peace, traitor. You were once a powerful general in God's army. You grew weak in your convictions, and you fell in love with this she-devil. You'd do well not to speak of my wife in such a manner, Manato warned. Humans can feel love. They were God's favored. Why do we have to limit ourselves when humans don't? We are superior. Emotions have no place in the kingdom of God. They make you weak, they are nothing but a hindrance, Abaddon snarled. Look at what they've brought you to, Loki. Making peace with the betrayers, impregnating this whore. Now you listen here, Kashina yelled as she stood up, her natural grace hampered by the life growing in her stomach. No, you listen, wench. You were the cause of my greatest ally's betrayal and fall. You are the cause of all the problems. God should have killed Lucifer when he started his rebellion. Maybe then we'd still have Loki and that abomination would not be growing in your stomach. There was no warning, just a flash of light against steel as Manato's flaming sword appeared from thin air, igniting in a blaze. A splash of blood on the ceiling was all that remained after the swing, the sword disappearing as quickly as it came. Ah! Abaddon cried in pain as his hands flew over his left eye. Abaddon! Uriel cried in distress, forming a spear of light and holding it in defense, as she jumped in front of her general. Be glad, Abaddon, Manato's cold voice echoed around the room, despite him having whispered it, I only took your eye. It could have been your head. Abaddon pulled his hands away from his face, the cauterized wound a single straight line from his jaw to his forehead, crossing his left eye which also had a cut across it, the eyelid split as well. You dare attack me? It's your one and only warning. My son is not an abomination, and you will do well to remember that. A thick, heavy silence fell upon the group, the only sounds being Abaddon's pained breathing, his new scar throbbing intensely. Finally, he turned away. This meeting is pointless. There shall never be peace so long as there are devils, fallen angels, and what you call your son in this existence. Watch your back, Loki. Come, Uriel, Abaddon commanded as they left the house. The rest of the meeting was nearly rendered moot, and an awkward silence permeated the room, and was only broken as Kashina fell to her knees, sobs racking her petite frame. Manato knelt next to his wife who continued to sob, Sirzex, Ajuka, and Azazel all looking on with sympathetic looks. I as T as HH how my baby is going in to be seen. Manato held her close to him as she latched onto him and cried into his shirt. We'll have no worries. Our son will be strong. We'll make sure of that. A clearing of throats brought their attention back to their guests. Azazel walked around the table and knelt down next to the couple and offered a small smile. I'm working on a project, the outcome of which will allow me to give artificially made sacred gears to any being. Bring your son to me when he is 10, and I will allow him to choose one that will be implanted in him, a gift from the fallen, to our brother who also wishes to know human emotion. Manato and Kashina were stunned. Never would they have thought that someone would view their son in such a light. But their thoughts were cut short by another. And bring him to me when he's 10, I'll try and give him his own evil piece set. I mean, the son of an original Satan, even one who was named after the Great Four, would certainly count as high-ranking. Ajuka smiled at the two, who were even more stunned. Why? Kashina asked, confused. Why are you so intent on helping our son? Sirzex was the one to answer. He'll be the one to bring change to the factions. I can feel it. He's going to be a big player. And if you don't mind my asking, what are you going to name him? Kashina smiled, as tears of joy ran down her cheeks. Her hands caressed her stomach, with Manato's hands joining hers. His name will be Naruto. 10 years later, a blonde, blue-eyed boy was flanked by a man who he looked like a carbon copy of, and a woman with red hair down to her ankles. He was tall for his age, standing at about 4 feet 9 inches. He also weighed a good, solid 90 pounds, which was due to all of the exercise and training that his parents had put him through. He was dressed in some sneakers, blue shorts, and a white shirt worn under an orange zip-up hoodie that lacked sleeves. His gaze looked up at his mom as they were walking down a hallway of an apartment complex. Where are we going again? Kashina looked down at her son who was quickly gaining on her short frame with a smile. His name is Azazel. He asked us to bring you to him before you were born so that he could give you an artificial sacred gear. Artificial sacred gear? Is it anything like the ones you guys told me about? Naruto asked, having been educated in the supernatural world since he could understand words. I don't know, Manato replied with a shrug, gaining his son's attention. We'll have to check it out, see what he's got, and if it's safe to implant one. Naruto furrowed his brows. He had been told that he was going to receive one of his choosing. But what if he chose wrong? What if the one he chooses isn't one that is compatible with him? What if he changes his mind later on? It was causing him a great deal of stress that rendered him a worrisome mess. Kashina smiled down at him as they reached the door they were supposed to go to. Don't worry, you'll choose the one that is best for you. You'll know it in your heart. Naruto nodded as his father knocked on the door. A short time later, the sound of the lock being undone was heard and the door swung open. It revealed a man with black hair and blonde bangs with stubble on his chin. He was wearing gray sweatpants and a blue shirt. He yawned with his hand over his mouth while rubbing his eyes to regain his focus. "What's wrong?" was his greeting. Nothing's wrong," Manato frowned. "You told us to come over today." The statement seemed to spark Azazel's mind into gear, and he finally looked at those standing in his doorway. "Oh. Manato-san, Kashina-san, sorry about that, I had a late night." He looked down and saw the small carbon copy of Manato standing between the two and smiled at the boy. "You must be Naruto-kun, pleased to meet you." "I'm Azazel." Yeah, I'm Naruto," Naruto said with a bow after getting a nudge from his mom. "It's nice to meet you, Azazel-san. Your parents have done a very good job raising you. So polite at your age." He smiled down, before stepping out of the way, allowing entrance into his house. "Please come in." The three Uzumakis entered the apartment, and the two older ones were surprised at just how clean the house was. For a bachelor, he kept his place tidy, despite the odd dish or magazine lying about. He shut the door behind them and motioned for them to follow him. He led them to what they thought was going to be a bedroom, only to open the door and enter what looked like a laboratory and machine shop rolled into one. And it was easily 4 times as big as the apartment building itself, which instantly told them they were in an artificial dimension. "In here is where I do all my work making artificial sacred gears. I've made quite a few, but it's up to you to decide which one you would have." Azazel smiled as he sat in a spinning office chair. "What kinds have you made?" Manato asked out of curiosity. Azazel hopped to his feet and walked over to a cabinet with pull-out doors labeled, "Azazel's Toys," and opened a drawer, showing the three there what was in it. Inside was a small golden dagger-looking pointy thing with a purple gem on the pommel. He picked it up and showed it to the Uzumaki family. "This is one of my favorite creations, the Downfall Dragon Spear. Its main purpose is to kill dragons, but works well on other races as well." He then placed the spear back in the drawer and pulled out what looked like a sword hilt. He held it up, presenting it to the family, before a glowing black-white blade erupted from the end that hummed faintly. It looked to be made of both light and darkness. "This one is cool. I call it the Blazer Shining Aura Darkness Blade." Needless to say, Naruto was in awe of the blade. It was bright, it was shiny, and it had a cool name. His fingers fidgeted in anticipation to hold the weapon, only to watch in confusion as the blade shrank to about the size of a bread knife. "It's also great as a kitchen utensil," he demonstrated as he cut a piece of bread that was toasted on one side when he was done. Naruto's face promptly fell in disappointment. It really wasn't as cool as he made it out to be. Not to interrupt or anything, Azazel-san," Kashina said as he started rummaging for another to show off, "but shouldn't we let Naruto look around and see if he can't find his own?" Azazel smacked his right palm with his left fist as he stood to his full height. "You're right. How very inappropriate of me to make this about showcasing my genius. Please, this way." He led Naruto and his parents toward a large panel on the wall, before walking over to a button next to it. The panel slid up into the ceiling, and it revealed a huge assortment of artificial sacred gears. Most of them were corporeal, able to be held. Others were bottled up in glass displays, and just glowing sources of light in multiple shades. "These are all of the sacred gears that I have made, and have not kept for myself," Azazel explained. "There are 2 categories, those that are attuned, the ones you can pick up, and those that are implanted, those glowing sources of light. Now, you only get to choose one, so please, ask as many questions about any of those that interest you." Naruto stepped forward and started looking at what was on display. His eyes were drawn every which way, but a metallic-looking one caught his eye first. "What's that one?" "Mirror's Edge. It allows you to reflect all spells and non-physical attacks back at your enemy." Naruto nodded and continued looking. His next focus was a large sword that didn't have a point, but was rounded, and looked like it had teeth along the fore and back of the blade. At the base was what looked like a motor. "This is strange. That's the Type 1 Hyper Eviscerator, a sword that has a chainsaw blade flowing along the edge. It's powered by your mana," Azazel smiled at his young charge. No thanks on that one. His eyes were then drawn to a green glowing light. What's this one? Ah, that's one of my better ones, one that is almost equal to a real sacred gear, Regenerist. Its ability is the complete regeneration of wounds. It's powered by your mana, and its draw is proportional to how severe the wound is. If you were a human and had mana, this could allow you to live forever as it stops the deterioration of your cells as they divide. But, seeing as you're supernatural, it'll just give you the ability to heal all wounds easily. That sounds like it is a sacred gear, Manato said with raised eyebrows. Why is it inferior? Well, there is a limit to just how much damage it can heal at a time. Say you lose your arm, over a few minutes, your arm would regrow and you would be able to keep on fighting if you have the mana after something so draining. Well, should your arm get lobbed off again, well, you'd have to wait for its cooldown to reset. So, while it's cooling down, you're still bleeding out, and you could possibly die, Azazel said with a small smile. Which is why it's always a good idea to keep a healer with you. What about small cuts and stuff like that? Naruto asked out of curiosity. Well, that's the thing, with most minor wounds, there's no cooldown, so you can get cut, and it'll heal up, then you can get bruised, and it'll fade. But with major wounds, it takes time and too many in a row could have serious complications. Naruto nodded, almost certain that he had found the one that he would take, but he decided to keep browsing, seeing what else Azazel had in stock. After various looks, questions, and Regenerist not leaving his mind, he finally asked about one more that sat 2 shelves down from Regenerist, which looked like a short dagger. That's the Morph Blade. It can change its size, shape, and even what weapon it is. It makes for an unpredictable attack if your opponent is coming at you with 2 daggers one moment and a broad axe the next. Naruto looked between the glowing green of Regenerist and the Morph Blade. He was having a hard time. On the one hand, he knew that if he could heal from any injury, he didn't have to worry about getting hurt. However, having a blade that could be anything his mind wanted it to be was more amazing. He started agonizing over what he wanted, but found himself looking to his parents for guidance. Neither of them had a healing factor, and both of them used weapons, albeit those made for their hands only. With a small nod, he knew what he wanted. I'll take the Morph Blade. It'll be much more helpful, and I'll know how to fight anyone with their own weapon if I train with any and all weapons that I can think of. Azazel nodded, before grabbing the blade and passing it to the young man. Alright, now, to attune that sacred gear with you, take a firm hold of your mana and let it envelop your hands and flow through the blade. Then, the blade will react in some way unique to you, and then regress to a shape that you find most familiar. Naruto nodded, and with practiced ease, he channeled his mana into the blade and felt the connection begin to form. Once the bond had solidified, the blade glowed brightly before expanding erratically, pushing Naruto back, and causing him to thud the display case pretty hard. This in turn jostled the shelves, and the glowing green case of Regenerist dislodged itself from its spot. The case fell and impacted upon Naruto's head, causing the glass to shatter and cut his face and shoulders pretty badly. Ah! He yelled out from the sudden attack. Nearly instantly, the Morph Blade changed back down to a katana, and Manato, Kasha, and Azazel looked on, seeing the damage caused to Naruto, who still had blood running down his face and arms. His parents rushed to his sides and started to remove shards of glass from him, Kasha panicking slightly that her baby had been hurt in such a way. But before their very eyes, the glass started getting pushed out of his skin, and tinkling to the floor as his wounds sizzled and steamed shut, leaving unblemished skin behind. Oh dear, Azazel said flatly, causing all 3 Uzumakis to look at him. It seems that you've also acquired Regenerist. And here I only meant to give you one of my babies. Naruto looked down. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Well, you can take the other one away, right? Kasha asked in curiosity, only to receive a shake of the head from Azazel. Nope, I can't. Those that are implanted, which happens through contact with the body, are immediately intertwined with the recipient. The only way to remove it is to kill the holder. Azazel sighed, before scratching the back of his head. You can have this one back then, Naruto said, holding out the Morph Blade. No can do, kid. That's attuned to you as well. It can no longer work for anyone else but you, Azazel informed the shorter blonde. Manato stepped in. Well, what do you propose we do? Azazel looked deep in thought for a minute before responding. Well, we'll call it even if I have a favor on tap from the two of you and Naruto-kun. And I can call it in any time that I wish. Manato and Kasha shared a look before nodding in agreement. Very well, that sounds fair. But, if your favor goes directly against our morals, we'll refuse. Excellent, Azazel smiled, before turning his attention down to the kid, now looking at his morph blade, concentrating and turning it into different shapes and designs. Congrats kid, you get 2 artificial sacred gears for the price of 1. Naruto looked up from his blade and flashed the fallen a smile that nearly split his face in two. Thank you so much, Azazel-san. Don't mention it, kid. Don't mention it, was his reply as he escorted the family from his home. 1 week later. This time the Uzumaki family found themselves in the underworld, standing outside of another building, this one looking like a mad scientist's laboratory. The red sky overhead giving the place an even creepier vibe. Naruto had trained all week long with his morph blade, and it was getting faster and faster at changing to his whim. His clothes were the same as he had the week prior, but this time he was wearing a pair of black fingerless gloves and sweatbands that made it more comfortable to hold his blade with. So, this is where Ajuka Beelzebub lives? Manato asked, taking in his surroundings as it had been a number of years since Manato had set foot in the underworld. Seems so, Kasha said with a smile. The building was located on a hillside, and was about a mile outside of the capital city of Lilith. The Uzumaki matron reached out and pressed the doorbell, which was odd, but then so was Ajuka. A scant few seconds later, Ajuka Beelzebub appeared in the doorway. His body was draped in a lab coat, and underneath he was wearing a suit. Ah, the Uzumaki clan, I've been expecting you. He then motioned them to come in, and it was revealed that his laboratory was very close to Azazel's pocket dimension, but there were more cables and pipes running to and through various machines. Please, come in. I've only got a couple finishing touches to a new potion before I'm done with it, Ajuka said as he walked back over to a workbench with some Bunsen burners and various beakers and test tubes lying about. He picked up an Erlenmeyer flask and started adding a light blue solution to the already green concoction. As the amount of liquid in the flask raised, all of a sudden, it started sizzling. Oh dear, that's not supposed to happen. As soon as the words left his mouth, a loud bang erupted into the room. This caused the 3 Uzumakis to jump in fright, the elder 2 less so than the younger. A cloud of some sort of smoke filled the air around his head, it was brightly colored, and the smell was acrid. When it cleared, it showed Ajuka with his hair blown back and stiff and his eyebrows were gone. He blinked a few times, trying to clear his now bloodshot eyes of anything. He gently set the still smoking Erlenmeyer flask down as well as the test tube he was holding. He then reached out to another part of the lab table and picked up a clipboard and pen and writing on it while talking to himself, Trial 22 is a failure. Back to the drawing board. He then turned back to the Uzumakis and motioned for them to follow him into a different part of the lab. Come. No time to waste now. Reluctantly, the family of 3 followed the slightly disturbed man deeper into his workshop. The next room that they came into was vastly different, inside it was very well furnished. The only piece of machinery was a small cabinet connected with a computer. Ajuka gestured towards the empty couch which the Uzumakis took while he took a seat in a cushy-looking office chair and turned back to the 3 with a smile on his face. So, Naruto-kun, I must ask a few preliminary questions before we make an evil piece set for you. Nothing too invasive, just a way to weed out those who would use them for self-gratification and other standard questions. Okay, Naruto shrugged. He steeled his mind for whatever barrage of questions was to come at him, and he was sorely disappointed. Okay, first question, what is your birthday? It had been nearly 30 minutes and the question seemed so random and arbitrary, but Ajuka assured Manato and Kasha that they were necessary. But really, how important could your current shoe size be? Or why would anyone need to know how many golf balls would fit in a 747 airplane? But it was the last question that seemed the most important. Okay, last question. If given evil pieces, what would you consider your peerage? Ajuka's tone on this question was dead serious whereas it had been light-hearted and whimsical before. What do you mean? Naruto asked, not quite grasping the question. Ajuka elaborated for the young half-devil. Well, if you were to have a peerage, how would you treat them? Without hesitation he got his answer, they'd be my friends. I would treat them better than that. I would make sure that they wouldn't have to get hurt, and we'd all work together to be the best. Ijuka looked at the child with a soft smile. Very good, Naruto-kun. Now, would you please hold out your forearm? I'm going to draw some blood, he said, pulling out a sealed syringe. Naruto shied away, having had a bad experience as a kid with needles had given him a fear. But, steeling his nerves, he held out his right arm and closed his eyes. He then waited, anticipating the inevitable pain that came with the small metal tube, yet he didn't feel anything. He slowly cracked his eyes open and saw Ijuka typing on his computer, the filled syringe locked into a port on the side of the small cabinet. Alrighty, just a few more seconds, and with a press of this button, you'll get your new evil piece set, Ijuka said before pressing the enter key on his keyboard, only for nothing to happen at all. He tried pressing the button again, only to get the same reaction. He turned to the screen and began typing at full speed, quickly analyzing the data that was being shown on his screen. Oh, that would explain it, he mumbled after 5 minutes of furious typing. Did I do something wrong? Naruto asked, confused and saddened. No, you did nothing wrong, Naruto-kun. There are a couple of reasons as to why this won't work, Ijuka said as he turned to face the family of 3. The first problem is that your mom isn't recognized as a high-class devil that is part of the original 72 Pillars of Hell. It probably has to do with the original Lucifer and how Kushina-sama rebelled and didn't participate in the last half of the war. Kushina frowned and worried her eyebrows in concern, so because I fell in love, Naruto-kun can't get his own evil piece set? Well, it's not just you, but Minato-san as well, Ijuka stated, turning his gaze on the mighty fallen. Me? Ijuka nodded his head. Usually, we don't have fallen angels resurrected as devils, seeing as the holy powers do not mesh with the dark of devils. However, we do have a few, but they're but bugs in comparison to you or Azazel-san. The holy energy flowing through Naruto-kun is so powerful that it nullifies the demonic powers of the evil pieces, or would if it were possible to craft a set. A pregnant silence filled the atmosphere of the room. Minato and Kushina looked saddened, but Naruto looked heartbroken. He had been looking to have people to protect and make friends with. As a group they would overcome any challenge before them. But all those dreams were dashed away. Ijuka cleared his throat to collect the attention of his guests. There is something else that I can give you. What is that? Naruto asked, his hopes rising a little bit. The brilliant scientist rubbed the back of his neck, and looked a little nervous. Well, I have a project that I have been working on for a while. It's a bit like what Azazel-san has been able to do. What do you mean? Minato asked, a dubious look flashing into his eyes. It's a devil's answer to sacred gears, only I've made it, so it's more like an empowered artificial sacred gear. It's about half a step away from being exactly like a sacred gear. What is it? Naruto asked, his curiosity being piqued. I call it the corrupted armament, Azazel informed the trio. Corrupted armament? Kushina asked. Yes, it is just like a sacred gear, but it is for devils or half-devils, Ijuka lectured. There are a couple problems that come with it, however. The first being that it is random. Whenever a corrupted armament is implanted, it is unknown exactly what it will become. The second is that it may not even manifest at all. It's got about a 30% success rate. Thirdly, in one implantation, it completely destroyed the mana pool of the host, making the use of all spells impossible. At hearing the last sentence, Kushina grabbed her son and hugged him to her chest. No, absolutely not. Even if it's only one time, the same could happen to Naruto-kun. I will not allow it. But, Mom, Naruto tried reasoning with her, and failed. But nothing, you will not be getting one, she said, holding him tightly, causing him to try and wriggle his way free. Minato looked to his wife, Kushina-chan, maybe we should let Naruto-kun tell us his feelings on this. You can't be seriously considering this, Minato? She gasped at him in shock. Minato's reply was a nod. The single action caused Kushina to loosen her grip and turn to her son worriedly. Naruto took a couple seconds recomposing himself and smoothing out his clothes. He tried smoothing out his hair, but it didn't help in the least with his inherited genetics. I want to get a corrupted armament, Naruto said after settling back into his position. I want to be able to help protect my friends and you guys. I need to be as strong as I can be. Kushina looked worriedly at her son, but upon seeing his determined look and her husband's proud gaze, she relented and nodded her head in confirmation of her son's wants. Ijuka nodded and stood up from his seat. He walked out of the room through a different door than what they entered through. It was only a minute later that he walked back out, and in his hand was a glowing red orb of swirling chaos. His hand was covered in a metal glove that seemed to have small discs on the fingertips and helped him to hold onto the orb. He stopped a few feet in front of Naruto and started his explanation. "Now, Naruto-kun, I'm going to shove this orb into your gut, where your mana pool is. If it all goes well, you'll be enveloped in a bright red light and your mind will know how to manifest your new weapon. And if not, well, hopefully we won't have to see that, He smiled at the preteen. "Now, I'll count to 3 and shove it into your gut. It might sting a little or you'll just feel some pressure." Naruto nodded and took a deep breath in preparation to tense up. 1. And Ajuka shoved the orb into his gut before Naruto could even react. It felt like he had had the wind knocked out of him and he doubled over after falling to his knees, coughing, trying to get air back into his lungs. The 3 adults looked on, waiting for Naruto to be enveloped in a bright light, only to be kept waiting. Ajuka frowned in displeasure. "What's that mean, Ajuka-san?" Kushina asked of the man. "It means that it didn't work. Naruto-kun didn't get a corrupted armament. Perhaps his holy energy is so high that it doesn't work," Ajuka theorized as he started to pull off the metal glove. "I'm sorry, Naruto-kun." Naruto rose to his feet, his face despondent. "It's alright, Ajuka-san. I guess I'll just have to train extra hard to get super strong." The somber moment wasn't meant to last forever as the door to the room was opened and revealed 2 individuals, a tall man and a short girl. The man was very handsome, and had medium-length red hair, with 2 longer strands framing his face. It was a shade or 2 deeper than Kushina's and had a luscious shine to it. He was wearing white pants with black boots on his legs. He had a white, long-sleeved button-up on underneath a black and gold waistcoat that was held together by 3 golden chains across the chest. His gray eyes were filled with surprise at the happenings in the room. "Oh, I didn't realize you had guests, Ajuka." "Ah, Sirzex, you're a little early," Ajuka informed his best friend and rival. I know, but I was just so excited. I mean, today is when my cute little sister gets her evil piece set." He beamed, placing the young girl in front of himself, showcasing her. The 4 occupants of the room turned their attention on the young girl. She was a very cute girl indeed. She was about average height for her age, which looked to be Naruto's age. Her hair was very long, looking like it hadn't been cut since the day she was born, and it flowed everywhere wildly. Her big green eyes looked at the gathered with curiosity. She was wearing a sundress with bike shorts underneath with sandals on. "This is my sister, Rias-chan. Say, hi, Rias-chan." She offered the group a cute smile and bowed. "Nice to meet you all, I'm Rias Gremory." The reactions were varied. Ajuka smiled, having met her several times in the past. Kushina cooed and smiled at her and returned her greeting. Manato nodded and offered his own greeting in return. Naruto just stared, wide-eyed and a small flush dusting his cheeks. Upon feeling Manato push him from behind a bit, he snapped out of it and bowed back to her. "And nice to meet you, Rias-san, I'm Naruto Uzumaki." Rias stepped forward after Naruto rose back into a standing position and offered her hand to him. "Let's be friends, so call me Rias-chan." Naruto flushed a bit more and nodded his head, taking her hand in his own in a shake. "Okay, and you can call me Naruto-kun as well." A sudden teasing catcall was heard in the direction of Ajuka. "Ooh. Looks like Naruto-kun has a crush," he said, spelling out crush, causing Manato and Kushina to chuckle at her son's misfortune, and a dark expression crossed the face of Sirzex. "Is that so?" the leader of the Mao questioned with a raised eyebrow. He kneeled down to Naruto's level, pulling Naruto's occupied hand free and into his own, giving it a slightly painful squeeze. "Nice to meet you, Naruto-kun. I'm Sirzex Lucifer, the leader of the 4 great Satans." Naruto felt nervous. Sirzex was casting a dark aura around himself. A skull could be seen in the background, and it looked like it wanted to eat Naruto's soul. The suddenly dark aura was lifted as Rias took Naruto's hand back, giving her older brother a childish glare. "Stop being mean to my friend, Oni-chan. Naruto-kun hasn't done anything and you're already being mean to him." What? I wasn't." Sirzex tried to defend himself, but was outmatched by his sister who puffed up her cheeks in annoyance and gave him a bigger glare. He started to sweat before giving a nervous chuckle. "I was just teasing." Yeah, that's it. Of course I want my little sister to have great friends like Naruto-kun here. Rias gave a huge smile before turning to Naruto again. So, are you getting your evil pieces today too, Naruto-kun? Naruto deflated a bit and tried to find a way to avoid talking about his failures that day, but was beat to it by Ijuka. I'm afraid Naruto-kun couldn't get a set. My device wouldn't let him. Rias looked upset at the news and gave Naruto a sympathetic look. Sirzex, on the other hand, looked surprised. Why did that happen? It should give a set to anyone of the blood of a high-class devil. Kushina-san is certainly a high-class devil. Ijuka shrugged and offered a lopsided smirk of bemusement. It might have to do with him not being a full-blooded devil as well. Sirzek's mouth did a very good, impression of understanding, but the conversation between the two old friends had gotten the attention of Rias, who turned back to her new friend and gave him a questioning look. You're not a full-blooded devil, Naruto-kun. Naruto shook his head and rubbed the back of his neck while giving her a grin of his own. Nope, my dad's a fallen angel. This reveal caused Rias to turn to Manato, who had been watching with his wife in amusement as their son made a new friend. Her eyes were wide as she looked at the tall blonde before turning her attention back to the shorter, but still taller than her, blonde, and looked at him in even more awe. Wow, so, that makes you a half-devil, half-fallen angel? Naruto nodded and to prove his point, allowed his wings to manifest. It was unique in that Naruto had been born with two sets of wings. A pair of black, feathered ones, and a smaller pair of bat-like wings. It was also worthy to note that the amount of wings that Naruto had seemed to reflect his power like his father. At 4 wings, he was considered exemplary among the power levels of the low-ranking fallen angels. He was still barely a speck compared to the vast well of power his father was. It wasn't well known that an angel's wings stopped at 12 in number, but their power could still be increased much further. It was hardly known because most 12-winged angels stopped trying to gain power after reaching that plateau. It was a dangerous territory, as complacency set in due to just how hard it was to attain 12 wings. Most angels stopped at either 6 or 8 wings, but there were far more numerous 2 and 4-winged beings than 6 and higher. That's so cool, Rias cried out, looking at his sets of wings. Her own pair of bat-like wings erupted from her back so that she could compare hers. I've only got 2, but I'm not half-fallen angel like you are. Is that why you have 2 sets? I think it's kind of like how angels and fallen rank themselves, Manato said, causing the younger redhead to look at him. To illustrate his point, he let his 12 wings expand from his back, causing Rias' eyes to widen in surprise. The more wings that an angel or fallen has denotes how much power he or she has. The most any can have is 12, but don't think that puts all 12-winged angels on the same power level. He then retracted his wings and gave her a smile. Rias nodded and then turned back to Naruto, examining his wings and asking him so many rapid-fire questions that he had no hope of answering. Ijuka drew his attention from the chattering kids and turned to Naruto's parents. So, does the number of wings that he has denote his power as well? Kushina nodded her head. As far as we can tell, he was born with more power in his body than any 2 or 4-winged angel that I've ever seen, so it seems safe to assume that his wings are also a gauge to his power in a similar fashion. Quite interesting indeed, Ijuka stated as they watched the 2 children interact and get to know each other better. Their conversation was interrupted as Ijuka insisted on giving Rias her evil pieces. The young redhead was then escorted to where Naruto had been sat and Ijuka's standard questionnaire began, the Uzumakis excusing themselves and going to wait elsewhere. 30 minutes later, a happy Rias emerged with a case holding her set, which she immediately took to show Naruto. He looked on in amusement as she went through all of the power sets, the values of the pieces, and other such things that she felt he needed to know. It was getting late and sadly, the children's carefree afternoon was coming to a close. It's getting late, we had best be getting back to my family's house, Sirzex informed the adults, causing Rias to frown in disappointment. But, I just started playing with Naruto-kun, we can't go yet. Rias insisted. Rias-chan, it's been almost 2 hours, Sirzex said with a small laugh at the girl's lack of concept of time. I'm sure mother and father are getting curious as to where you are. Rias frowned and she turned to Naruto, wrapping her arms around his neck, causing a small flush to dust his cheeks, but I don't wanna. I wanna play with Naruto-kun more. Kushina was the one who diffused the little girl's argument as she knelt down beside the 2 10-year-olds. How about this? Rias-chan. Next weekend you can come and have a sleepover at our house. That way you and Naruto-chan can play all weekend, how's that sound? Both of their eyes widened at the suggestion and eagerly agreed. It was obvious that the two had become very close, very fast friends. And just like that, the Uzumakis and Searzaks and Rias left Ajuka's home with promises to make sure it was okay with her parents and promises for a fun weekend. The joy and happiness in the two was boundless and infectious. If only those carefree days could have stayed. It was now April, 6 months after Naruto had received his 2 artificial sacred gears and his corrupted armament. It was also 6 months after Naruto had become best friends with the red-haired Gremory heir. Yes, he and Rias were closer than just about anything. One normally spent the weekend at the other's house, and it was because of this that the Uzumaki family and the Gremory clan became very close to the other. Lady Venelana, Rias' mother, would dote on Naruto like he was her own son. She had also become very good friends with Kushina, whom she often went on excursions to the mall with. Manato and Lord Gremory bonded the way men usually bond, over a good bottle of booze. From then on they were almost as bad as their wives with gossip. Except of course the topics were more of what new model of car was coming out or whose sports team was winning. But that was enough to make a good foundation for friendship for the two men. It was a weekend that Naruto was staying with the Gremory clan. This time it was in celebration of Rias' 11th birthday. The entire weekend had been a blast and they had stayed up late watching anime and playing games all weekend long. They were even pigging out on all kinds of Rias' favorite foods from the human world. It had been exhausting for everyone involved and now Naruto was just getting ready to leave, traveling the only way devils could. He hugged Rias goodbye and she informed him that next weekend's venue was his place, where they were going to be having another anime marathon. Don't forget, it'll be my choice for what we watch, Naruto informed his cohort. As long as it isn't another stupid one like that whole Metal Alchemist one, Rias teased while sticking her tongue out at him. Peeved, Naruto scoffed. Yeah, and like your schoolgirl Moon was good. The two smiled to each other as the circle Naruto's mother used to travel lit up underneath his feet. With a final wave, Naruto sank into the spell and was transported to his house in the human world. After the initial delay of regaining his senses, Naruto immediately noticed something was wrong. All of the lights were turned off in his house and it was dead silent. Hello? Naruto called into the darkness as he tried to find the nearest light switch. Mom? Dad? Usually when Naruto was due to arrive at home, his parents would greet him and there would be food on the table. The addition of lights didn't help with answering his question, however. He walked to the kitchen, turning on the lights as he went. The counters were bare of any food having been pulled out for dinner. He called out to his parents again, getting slightly worried that there weren't any responses. He kept going through the house, a bit quicker now. Lights lit up the house, room by room, and his frantic cries echoed in the empty, silent house. When he ran out of rooms to check, he started to cry in fear. He had no idea where his parents were, and it caused him to start panicking in fear. In the huge house, the one that held all the memories of his time alive, he was alone. His vision started to swim as he started to hyperventilate from panic and stress. He ran to his parents' bedroom phone and called his mom's cell phone number. It started to ring and his heart started to lighten, only to plummet suddenly when he heard his mother's ringtone come from the top of her chest of drawers. He slammed the receiver down, ending the call and quickly dialed his father's number. He was once again met with the sound of a familiar ringtone, only this time it came from the bedside table on the opposite side of the bed. He hung up the phone and started to hyperventilate again. He was having a panic attack and wasn't getting enough oxygen into his bloodstream and his brain started to shut down from all the stress. With barely a warning, his vision darkened and he collapsed unconscious upon the carpeted floor of his parents' bedroom. The morning sun streamed in through the curtains, illuminating the face of Naruto, scrunched up in worry, as he started to return to the world of the living. His eyes widened when he realized he wasn't in his bed and he shot up into a sitting position. He looked around, noticing his surroundings, and his worst fears were realized. It hadn't been a dream. His parents were missing, and he had no idea where they went. He forced himself to calm down and think rationally, even though tears started to fall from his eyes. What had he been taught to do in situations like this? The only problem was that he hadn't been taught how to act in a scenario like this. Wiping his eyes, he steeled himself and walked to the kitchen, where he proceeded to make himself a bowl of cereal for breakfast. His stomach was running on close to empty and it was starting to affect him. It was hard to eat with his throat tightened from wanting to cry, but he managed. He proceeded to wash his bowl like he had been taught, and started to think of what he should do. Should he call the police? How could they help? His parents weren't human, they didn't need to exit the house to leave it. He struggled to come up with some sort of action plan, but all he wanted was for his parents to come home and hold him and tell him it was all right. Like a bolt of lightning, he was struck with the idea to go to the Gremory clan. Lord Gremory would know what to do. He was a smart and kind man, and he could help. Naruto made his way through the house and turned off all the lights that he had turned on last night, before making his way to his living room and activating the transportation circle that allowed him to travel to the Gremory manor in hell. Reappearing a few minutes later in the main foyer of the house, he had curious looks thrown his way by some of the butlers and maids as Haruka, the head maid, made her way over to Naruto, concern on her face at seeing Naruto in the clothes from yesterday. She was a very pretty woman with short, sea-foam green hair and hazel eyes. She was average in height and wore a standard French maid uniform. "Naruto-sama? What are you doing back here so soon?" Naruto turned to her, and she could see the tear streaks on his cheeks, and his eyes were puffy and red from crying. Immediately, she crouched to his level and started to look him over, making sure he wasn't hurt. "Are you alright, Naruto-sama? You're not hurt, are you?" she asked as she started gently looking at his arms and legs to see if he had any visible signs of being hurt. "And no, I'm all right," he said, and she could hear the distress and barely restrained tears in his voice. "See, can I talk to Lord Gremory, please?" Haruka nodded and took his hand and led him to the first-floor study that was Lord Gremory's office. Without thinking, she barged into the room, interrupting a meeting between Lord Gremory and his son, Sirzex. Both men were surprised by the intrusion, but that was quickly forgotten at seeing Haruka's distressed expression and the young blonde that was barely keeping it together being led by her. The two men rose to their feet and rushed to the pair with Lord Gremory kneeling in front of Naruto. "Naruto-kun? What's wrong? Did something happen?" Naruto nodded and choked out a single sentence, "Mom and Dad are gone," before he broke down into tears as he latched onto his secondary father figure, sobs racking his frame. The elder man held the sobbing boy before turning to his son and shooting him a look, which was responded to with a nod as Sirzex left, intent upon sending his peerage to find the other parts of the Uzumaki family. Sirzex and Lord Gremory met up 3 hours later in the elder man's study, both their faces grim. Beowulf and McGregor weren't able to find a single trace of Manato or Kasha. "It's as if they just disappeared from the face of the earth," Sirzex informed his father. "Not even McGregor's magic could locate them. This is troubling," Lord Gremory said as he leaned against his desk. "What would cause Manato and Kasha to just up and disappear like that?" "Well, they did have many enemies. Is it possible that they were kidnapped?" Sirzex proposed. "No, I don't think so. How many people out there could actually match either one of them in battle, let alone both of them?" "There also would have been signs of a struggle," the Gremory head said with his eyes closed. "Are you implying that they left by choice?" Sirzex asked with a frown on his face. Teal eyes were revealed as Lord Gremory nodded solemnly. "It's what makes most sense. But what made them leave is a better question. Maybe someone threatened Naruto-kun?" Sirzex suggested, but shook his head with a cynical smile. But then and again, who would be stupid enough to threaten their son? It was quiet until a knock was heard at the door of the study, prompting Lord Gremory to beckon the person on the other side to come in. In walked a stunning beauty with long gray hair braided in long braids in the back and 2 smaller ones in the front. She was adorned in a French maid outfit and had her hand clasped at her lap, causing her impressive bust to be further magnified. She was Graphia Lucifuge, the wife of Sirzex. She bowed to both her husband and father-in-law before giving her debriefing. "It seems all traces of Manato and Kasha have been erased from the human world. Neither showed up for their jobs and their bank account was cleared out late Friday evening. It seems that they left soon after Naruto-kun came here for the night. It seems that the Uzumakis do not want to be found," Sirzex said with a frown. Lord Gremory turned to Graphia. "Could I trouble you to fetch Venelana? I have some things to discuss with her." Graphia nodded, and left back out into the hall to find her mother-in-law. Naruto sat in the living room with Venelana, who had him wrapped in her arms and sitting in her lap as she tried her best to provide security and warmth to the blonde. They had been sitting in near silence as they waited for word on Naruto's parents. Venelana was definitely Rias' mother, as the young girl looked exactly like her, minus the brown hair. She was a very loving and caring person, which was why she and Rias got along so well. She and Naruto just sat in the living room, neither one speaking. Naruto had quit crying a couple hours prior, and now he just sat, empty and broken. Their silence was interrupted by Grafia entering and approaching the two. "Father would like to see you, mother," she informed Venelana, who nodded and looked down at the blonde in her lap. "Naruto-kun, I've got to leave for a few moments." The statement made Naruto just latch onto her tighter as his eyes widened in fear at being left alone. "It's okay, I'll only be a couple of rooms away. And Grafia will stay with you until I get back, right Grafia-chan?" "Yes, it would be a privilege to spend time alone with such a handsome young man," Grafia said as she sat down next to the pair. It took a couple of minutes, but the two women were able to get Naruto transferred over to Grafia, whom he latched onto just like he had with Venelana. Afterwards, the lady of the house left and joined her husband and son in the study, leaving Grafia alone with Naruto. It was silent until Grafia started speaking up, running her fingers through Naruto's soft hair. "I hope that when Sears-kun and I have children, they're as handsome as you are." Her attempt at conversation was met with silence, which caused her to frown slightly. She cast her gaze upon a clock in the room, before smiling slightly. "Rias-chan is due to return from school shortly. That'll be nice, won't it?" This time, she got a response, a small nod. "Do you think she would want to see you like this?" A shake of the head this time. "How about we try and be brave, for Rias-chan, okay? Seeing you like this would make her really sad, right?" Another nod. "Come, let's go get you cleaned up, maybe a change of clothes as well, okay?" Grafia easily moved the 10-year-old off her lap, held his hand as she led him to one of the bathrooms on the second floor. It was a slightly awkward affair as Grafia bathed Naruto, for Naruto at least. Grafia seemed to have no problem with it. After the bath, he was dressed in some new clothes that were dropped off by one of the Gremory servants. They made their way down to the living room again, where Naruto turned to Grafia and opened his mouth like he was going to ask her something, but nothing came out. "What's on your mind, Naruto-kun?" Grafia asked, crouching down to his level. Naruto looked down and frowned. He then looked back up to the wife of Lucifer, and this time, he could find the words he was looking for. "What am I supposed to do now, Grafia-ni-chan?" "Do? What do you mean?" "I mean, how am I supposed to act now?" Naruto asked. "How do you think you should act, Naruto-kun?" Grafia asked him in return. I want to get angry. I want to just cry. I want to crawl in a hole and never come out again. I want to punch things. But I don't want to worry Rias-chan," Naruto explained. Grafia nodded to the blonde. "Those are completely rational things to want to do, Naruto-kun. But you need to be strong. Not just for yourself, but for Rias. You and she are best friends, and she'll worry even more if you're sad. You don't want to do that to your best friend, do you?" "No, I'll be strong, for Rias-chan," Naruto said, his eyes stealing a bit. "Good, but you shouldn't bottle up all those sad emotions either. You should use them," Grafia instructed. Seeing his confused expression, she elaborated, "They can eat you from the inside out. It's not hard to be overrun by bottled up emotions like that. So you should channel those feelings into something. Use them to get stronger so that you can get the answers you need." Naruto nodded in understanding. He couldn't let Rias know how he was feeling, she would be worried and sad. He needed to come up with a cover story. He turned to Grafia with pleading eyes. "What do I tell her?" "I can't tell her the truth." Grafia started to think it over before telling him with a small smile. "Just say they're on a business trip and you're going to stay with her family for a bit and that you forgot about it." "But what about when they're supposed to come back?" "Just say that they had to stay longer," Grafia suggested with a gentle smile. She received a nod in confirmation, before the light of the Gremory household's teleportation seal lit up the room. From it appeared the subject of the conversation between Grafia and Naruto. The redhead opened her eyes and gave a confused look. "Grafia-ni-chan? Naruto-kun? What are you both doing here?" Naruto had felt bad about lying to Rias initially, but rationalized it as a necessary evil. Rias lit up at the thought of her best friend living with her for a while, the story of which the whole family perpetrated to the young girl. Naruto had assured them that he would tell her later, when he had figured out what he was going to do for himself. And so it came to be that Naruto and Rias lived together for 2.5 years. Naruto's house had been sold. Most of the furnishings had left with it, except most of Naruto's things and some of the personal items that reminded him of his parents. From the sale of his childhood house, he had enough to live off of for a while, but the Gremory household decided that they would foot the bill for most of his expenses, but he had to leave school and have a private tutor teach him, just as what was happening with Rias. During his tenure in the Gremory house, he also received combat tutors as well, those that helped him gain real-life combat experience. Once they learned that with his regenerist he was able to take very brutal hits that would normally kill most. It was painful and only served to make himself angrier, but he used that anger to make himself that much stronger. He grew in leaps and bounds with his morph blade, being able to increase its density without changing its volume, making it weigh tons while still retaining small shapes. It allowed for very destructive blows and collateral property damage from training mishaps. He was also tutored by Rias' magic coach, yet he seemed to not have as great a time learning that part of combat, and most of it was trial and error with half of his spells as they were those of the fallen and the favored. He was also only allowed to use his devil spells in combat situations as his holy powers could prove fatal to everyone but himself. In all, he was definitely a high-class devil and very powerful in his own right, especially for just a 13-year-old. His obvious ability and skill earned him a friend with whom he could spar in the form of Rias' cousin, Cyraorg Bial. The two boys, both in the hormonal stages of puberty, were testosterone-fueled fighters, often fighting just to fight. But Naruto only got that way when around Cyraorg, and the two grew stronger together, with their clashes ending with either side the victor and their records tied up. But with Rias, Naruto's relationship grew the most. He was around her constantly, and they had grown very close. Naruto was sure that he was in love with Rias, and could almost feel that she felt the same, yet neither of the young teens could bring themselves to admit to the other that it was true. Just about every waking moment was spent together if they weren't being tutored nor had a training session. Naruto had clung to Rias as a lifeline in his sinking life, and he had found himself a rock in her that grounded him and let him know that it was going to be all right. She was his everything, and he found himself pining after her, yet he could never tell. Currently, the Gremory heir and her best friend were sitting at a small table across from each other. Between the two was a chessboard. Rias' color was white, while Naruto's was black. Currently, Naruto was on the ropes, which he found himself on whenever he faced Rias. His ratio with Cyraorg may have been 50-50 in combat spars, but with Rias in chess, it was 30-70. Sometimes he could come up with a surprise and make a win out of a bad situation, but for the most part, she was his superior at the game, which they found themselves playing far more since Rias had started thinking about just what type of people she was going to have in her peerage. Rias had started to blossom into a very beautiful woman, just like her mother. Her hair was still long and usually left to hang free, but one strand stuck up in a curl from the top of her head. She was at about average height for 13 at 5 foot even, and she weighed 100 pounds sopping wet. Her womanly curves were coming in and her chest was already at a B cup. She preferred to wear skirts and blouses as they weren't as restrictive and she felt more comfortable in them. She sat with her legs crossed, and her left arm folded across her stomach, underneath her S, making them look bigger than they were. A smug smirk played across her lips as lazily lidded eyes gazed seductively at her opponent, enticing him to make more mistakes. Naruto, on the other hand, took a different approach to his wardrobe. If he wasn't in street clothes, he was in an orange tank top and either black shorts or sweatpants depending on what season it was for training. He took to wearing jikatabi as they conformed to his feet better and didn't allow for as much clothing slippage. Currently he was in jeans and an open button-down shirt over a white undershirt. His feet were bare, his preferred option if he had a choice. He had a 1,000-yard stare at the chessboard as sweat beaded on his forehead in concentration. His left hand was placed against his forehead as his mind ran through all the moves that he could make. His right hand was poised above his queen's knight, which was sitting far out of his comfort zone. His king's bishop and rook were all of the powerful pieces he had left. His queen had been taken a little while ago by Rias' king's rook, and she had wiped the floor with his other pieces with just one knight and her bishops early on. He was left with 2 pawns, both locked down by other pawns, and her queen's rook was closing in on his king. Just as he thought it was over and he was going to concede, he saw the move that he would make and put him back in the game. Bishop to g5, he stated as he moved his piece with a triumphant smirk, capturing one of her pawns. Rias looked surprised at the move, if the widening of her eyes was anything to go by, but what she said was definitely contrary to that expression. Could you have made a worse move? Huh? Was Naruto's smart reply. He then watched in horror as Rias made her move by grabbing her king's rook and placing it at Naruto's rightmost empty pawn spot. Rook to h2. Checkmate. Rias gave him a victorious smile as she stuck her tongue out at him. Naruto stared in horror at his stupid move. He was definitely not cut out for strategy like this. He looked up and gave Rias a smile of defeat. You got me, Rias-chan. Ah. What's the correct way to say it? She chided with a playful smirk. Naruto sighed in exasperation. You're my better in this competition of wit and skill. Please, be gentle with my punishment, oh mistress, Rias-sama. A satisfied smile split her lips as she folded her arms under her growing bust. That's better. Good boy, Naruto-kun. Naruto just rolled his eyes at her quirkiness. His expression softened as they reset the board. He was truly grateful to Rias for being his friend and for being there when no one else was. He had remained strong the last year and hadn't revealed his secret to her. Yet, he knew he was going to have to. He hated keeping it from her, and he knew that it would hurt their friendship the longer that he kept it from her. He didn't want to lose her. Hey, let's go watch some movies in my room? Rias suggested, breaking him out of his thoughts. Sure, sounds like a plan. Naruto smiled at her as they both stood up and made their way into Rias' room on the floor above them. Her room had changed little over the years. Her bed was still a king-sized 4-poster, her carpet was still a crimson a shade or two lighter than her hair, and her walls were an insufferable pink that Naruto teased her mercilessly about. She made her way over to the shelf and pulled out a DVD and walked over to her TV where she put it into her gaming console. She then turned and took a flying leap into the bed, landing and bouncing just to Naruto's right side, who was sitting up against the headboard already in place for the movie. She reached down and pulled the comforter up over their legs. She then took Naruto's right arm in her hands and placed it around her shoulders as she snuggled into his side. She then pulled the blanket up higher, resting it under her chin and across Naruto's chest. He gazed down at her as his heart thumped heavily and painfully in his chest. His thoughts raced, a scattered mass of do this, do that, don't do it, do it. Finally, about 15 minutes into the movie, his mind was made up. He shifted a little bit, turning to face her more. His movement caused her to break away from the movie to turn her attention to him. She looked at him, only to see him looking at her with an expression that she had only seen on the face of her father or her brother, and only towards their respective wives. Naruto-kun? She questioned, as her face heated up under his gaze. Quick as a flash, Naruto ducked down and gently pressed his lips to hers, his eyes closing while hers widened in surprise. It was just a few brief seconds, but the electricity that passed through them made it feel like a lifetime. Naruto slowly pulled back, breaking the contact between their lips. He slowly opened his eyes to her shocked expression. At first she said nothing, her voice failing her. Sorry, Rias-chan, Naruto whispered, his face flush in embarrassment. He was stopped from saying anything else as Rias flung her arms around his neck and kissed him with much more force than he kissed her with. This was a kiss of hungry passion. A kiss of relief. A kiss of confirmation. Naruto wrapped his arms around her back, encasing her in a hug as they kissed each other. They eventually broke apart for air, resting their foreheads against each other. After their breaths had been caught, they returned to kissing, which quickly turned to making out as Rias forced her tongue into Naruto's mouth, surprising him, but encouraging him to explore her mouth as well. Naruto gently laid them both down, pulling her on top of himself. As their lips and tongues explored each other's, Naruto's hands ran up and down Rias' back, sending electric jolts up and down her spine. Her hands weren't idle either as they tangled in his soft, unruly hair. It was a war that left the movie they were watching unwatched. The air was filled with throaty moans, breathy sighs, and the sounds of clothing being shuffled and rustled as they groped hungrily at the other's body. As the battle of tongues was coming to a close, Rias and Naruto separated with very soft, brief kisses, before climaxing with a long, deep tongue duel that when they pulled away breathlessly, left a strand of saliva connecting their tongues. The strand broke as they pulled their own tongues back into their mouths, and they gazed at each other with passion and lust in their eyes. Naruto's hands had ended up under Ria's skirt, caressing her panty-covered behind and soft thighs. Her blouse had gotten lost and she was clad only in her bra. Naruto's undershirt and button-down had been lost as well, leaving his torso bare to the world, where Ria's hands had ended up, caressing his hard, defined chest muscles. Both of their faces were flushed, but not from embarrassment. Rias sat up, across his hips, and discovered another reaction that had occurred from their heavy makeout session. "Oh my, Naruto-kun, you naughty boy," she said, raising a hand to her mouth as she felt his manhood pulsing and pushing into her butt. "I can't help it," he said with just a little bit of embarrassment. "You're so beautiful and you look so amazing right now." "Well, aren't you just a little Casanova?" she purred out as she leaned back down and placed a kiss upon his lips. She sat back up and ground her butt into his penis, making his eyes roll into the back of his head and a groan of pleasure to escape his throat. "Oh, do you like that?" "Why yeah, feels good," Naruto groaned out, as his hands gripped onto her hips to stop her from teasing him. "Please, no more, or I might not be able to hold back any longer." "Hold back what?" Rias asked throatily. Suddenly her world was turned upside down as she found herself pinned under the strong and sturdy form of Naruto. Her legs were still spread around his hips. She threw her head back and moaned loudly in pleasure as Naruto ground his manhood into her womanhood. "I won't be able to stop myself from taking you as mine," Naruto whispered softly into her ear, causing a shiver to run up her spine. "Probably the most amazing thing I've ever been privileged to," Naruto agreed with a kiss to her forehead. "Oof, I agree," came an amused voice that was neither Naruto nor Rias. Both pairs of eyes widened as they looked at Rias' desk and saw a girl around their age sitting in the chair that was sitting in front of the windows, which happened to be open. She was beautiful and had long black hair that was longer than even Rias' crimson locks. She was dressed in a traditional kimono, and she currently had her right hand raised to her mouth as she giggled into her hand. Her violet eyes danced in mirth and perverseness at the duo's expressions. She was Akeno Himejima, Rias' queen in her peerage. "Akeno!" Rias screamed as her face lit up crimson with rage. "Who invited you in?" "I did," the chuckling girl replied cheekily. "I do have wings, you know." "Well, get out!" Rias roared as she threw a pillow that struck her queen in the face squarely. She wasn't mad that she had seen her and Naruto naked, just mad that she had barged in during an intimate moment. "My oh my, what will Kaneko-chan think of this?" Akeno mused as she picked the pillow back up and placed it in her lap. Her sadistic side was winning out and was causing her to tease her king mercilessly. Plus, it gave her more time to check out Naruto in his full glory. Oh, how she wanted to tie him up and do unspeakable things to him. "Leave, Akeno, and don't breathe a word of this to anyone. That's an order from your king," Rias said sternly. Akeno just nodded in agreement before spreading her bat-like wings and taking off out of the window from whence she came. I don't know why I made her my queen," Rias groused out in exasperation. She flopped down on her back, next to Naruto who was on his back as well. He hadn't covered up when she came in, being that she had seen him naked multiple times. Naruto chuckled and slipped his arm around her shoulders from underneath again and pulled her so that she was halfway laying on his chest. "You love her like a sister and you know it. You're also a sap for a sob story as well. Speaking of, what does this make us now?" Naruto asked her as he broke away from the kiss. "Honestly, I don't know. I want to be your girlfriend publicly, but with how my parents are as well as Oni-sama. I don't want to lose you after just getting you." Naruto gained a speculative look. It was a good point. It was no secret that Searsex liked Naruto as a person, but as anyone close to his baby sister, he was as cockroach before a princess in the Mao's eyes. "Then we'll be a secret couple." Rias thought it over and quickly agreed to it. She then pulled the covers up over their nude bodies, before getting in a spooning position. She suggested that they try and get some sleep, which they gave a good try, but found that it was impossible as sleep eluded them. Instead they stayed up all night talking about everything that came to mind. It was during that time that Naruto and Rias had a discussion about Naruto's biggest secret, the truth about his parents. It was a shock to the blonde when he was interrupted by his red-haired girlfriend when she informed him she already knew and didn't think any less of him for not telling her. She understood that he had needed time to come to terms with his abandonment. After that, they continued talking about anything and everything that came to mind. Rias confided that she was thinking of going to school on Earth with the humans, and Naruto encouraged her, thinking that it was a great idea. It was the wee hours of the morning when both teens finally drifted off to sleep, cuddled up together for the best sleep that either one had. Currently, Sears was escorting the birthday girl, plus Naruto, Akeno, and Kaneko, to the familiar forest to get them their magical companions. Appearing in the wooded hollow, the company of five was met with an older-looking teen by the name of Zatoji. He was dressed in maroon shorts with a white wife beater, a long-sleeved blue shirt tied around his waist, a backwards-facing baseball cap, along with gloves on his hands and sandals on his feet. A large yellow backpack was on his back. "Yo," he greeted the group merrily with a wave. "My name's Zatoji and I'm an apprentice-level familiar master. Sears-sama informed me of your coming, and instructed me to take you on a tour through the forest to get yourself some familiars." "Thank you, Zatoji-san," Sears stated as he stepped forward and gestured to the group behind himself. "This is my cute little sister, Ria-tan. Please, call me Rias." Rias deadpanned at her brother's nickname. "And the others are Akeno and Kaneko," Sears stated, as if he hadn't been interrupted, gesturing to the other two girls. He then gave a dramatic sigh, and gestured flippantly to the only other male of the group, and, "That's the pest who is nothing but a troublemaker for my Ria-tan." "Hey, I have a name too, asshole," Naruto roared at the man. Even in the 2.5 years that Naruto had been living with the Gremory family, Sears had not warmed up to him in the least. It almost seemed as if he had gotten even more coldly towards the boy. "My name's Naruto. Nice to meet you, Zatoji-san." "Well, it's nice to meet you all. Please, if you'll follow me, the night is waning," and with that, Zatoji rushed off into the forest excitedly. After several minutes of walking and questioning on Zatoji's part, they came upon a small hollowed-out tree, from which a small, friendly kitten emerged. It was white with hazel eyes, and Kaneko's own eyes seemed to widen as they focused on the small creature. "Kitty," she muttered out as she walked over and crouched down to the small cat's level. It mewed in excitement as it arched its head into her palm, making her pet it. Its plan sort of backfired as Kaneko swept it up into her arms and gave it a warm, loving hug. She immediately spun on her heel and gave a nod. "I want this one." Zatoji gave a hearty laugh. He had figured that she would want a cat, which was why he had led the group to this area, which he stated as much. "Okay, let's get the contract formed between you two." A couple more seconds later, the contract was sealed, and Kaneko held the happy, little kitten in her arms as they continued on, searching for more creatures. A faint, green glowing was seen through the trees, which drew the group to a small clearing. In it, dancing around in a circle, were several small demons. They were humanoid, with small bodies, and heads like people. Their heads were adorned with small patches of hair or fur, it was hard to tell. And in their hair was either one or two short horns. They were dancing around like they were worshipping something, and seemed to take minimal interest in the group. Era, what are these creatures, Zatoji-san?" Akeno questioned, looking at the group of 6 little beings, all dancing around in a circle. "These are forest demons. They're fairly common, but usually very shy. They like to hide behind leaves whenever larger creatures come into their territory. They're very fun-loving too, as you can see," he commented as he gestured to their dancing, which was at a part where they all faced each other in their circle and shook their butts at those outside it. "Are you thinking of having one as your familiar, Akeno-san?" Akeno giggled into her hand before shaking her head. "Oh my, no, I would like them all. They're just so cute." Zatoji laughed uproariously and everyone watched as Akeno approached the group, as their little dance was halted. One of the green-colored ones with a single horn came up to her and crossed its arms as if to ask her what it wanted. It seemed like this was the leader of their little troop. Akeno then explained to the little guy that she wanted the entire group to be her familiars and promised to make sure that they can have fun whenever they want and to take care of them. The leader turned back to his brethren and with unintelligible noises, they seemed to have a short conversation, before he turned back to Akeno and offered his arm, which Akeno took gently and shook in a deal. With a small flash of light, the 6 beings and Akeno were now contracted, making them start to dance in a circle again. But this one was different in that there was a lot of hip thrusting, and it was around Akino's ankles. The group trekked onward, still continuing with their search. It wasn't long before the sound of flapping wings was heard, causing the group to look to the sky, and what they saw was a huge colony of bats, all resting in the branches overhead, hanging upside down. One that was rather big unfurled its wings and swooped down, aiming for the first target it saw, which happened to be Rias. Before the red-headed heiress could react, it flew right into her face, full speed. Ouch! What was that for? She shouted her question at the bat, which was now circling around her head. Quick as a flash, her hands lashed out, catching the bat, which allowed the group to get a good look at the creature. It was almost a perfect circle and about the size and weight of a softball. It had 2 pointy ears, 2 small clawed feet, and a stubby, pointed tail coming out of its back, just above its butt. It was primarily 2 colors, brown-black on its top, with a triangular point coming down to its nose, giving its eyes the appearance it was leering all the time. Its lower half was a pinkish brown, which included its mouth, which seemed to be smirking at Rias. "Well, aren't you going to say you're sorry?" She was instead met with high-pitched bat giggles. The rather large bat struggled a bit before popping out of her grasp and continued to fly around her head, tauntingly. Zatoji laughed uproariously. "Well, looks like that devil bat has become fond of you." "Devil bat?" Rias asked with a puzzled look on her face. "Yeah, it's a relatively new term for it. It's in reference to its tail, which looks like that of a cartoon devil's tail," he informed her. "They have a unique ability to transform into a human form, which has made them very popular with devils operating in the human world." "Is that so?" Rias hummed to herself. Her eyes flashed in a calculative manner before a small, pleased smirk crossed her face. "If that is the case, then I want this devil bat as my familiar," she declared while pointing at the flying creature, her left hand fisted against her hip. The bat seemed to smirk back at her before it was engulfed in a cloud of smoke, which when it cleared revealed a woman, a little bit older than Rias. She was enchanting with short brown hair that framed her face and bright green eyes just like Rias. She was very gifted in the womanly areas. She was garbed in a pink and black dress with shoulder adornments that looked reminiscent of bat wings. She had an amused smile on her face as she extended her right hand to Rias, much like how Akino's familiar had done for her. Rias gave a pleasant smile back, before clasping her hand with her new familiar. Zatoji invoked the contract, since the devil bat couldn't do it, just like Kaniko's kitten, but unlike Akino's forest demons. When the contract was made, the devil bat reassumed its original form and perched itself on her shoulder. She turned and gave Naruto a brilliant smile. "Look, Naruto-kun. My very own familiar. That's awesome, Rias-chan. You two will work well together, I can feel it," Naruto praised his secret girlfriend. "Well, now that everyone has a familiar, we should get to leaving," Sirzex spoke up, turning around and taking a few steps away. "I don't have one yet," Naruto reminded Sirzex with a deadpan expression. "Too bad, we're running out of time, you'll have to wait to come back later," the leader of the Mao tossed over his shoulder. "Well, I'm not leaving until I get a familiar," Naruto said, turning away from the man who held little love for the blonde. He was met with a sharp pain in the back of his head for his actions. He cried out in pain and looked behind him, watching as a small rock settled into place. "Hey, you shitty devil! You didn't have to throw a rock at me just because I disagreed with you." "What was that, little boy?" Sirzex asked, suddenly appearing right in front of Naruto, giving him a threatening glare. "You heard me, you damn sis-con. You didn't have to throw a rock at me," Naruto shouted, standing on his tiptoes to force his forehead into Sirzek's own as they butted heads. "Peeved. As if I'd do something so childish as to throw a stone at you." Sirzek scoffed as he pushed back against the blonde. "Oh yeah, then how did that stone hit the back of my head? You were the only one behind me and with sufficient motive to do it." Naruto gnashed his teeth in fury as he started to roll his sleeves up in preparation for a fight. Now Naruto-kun, Oni-sama." Rias tried to calm the two down. They were saved from coming to blows as the sounds of high-pitched laughter sounded from the bushes to their sides. The group watched as the leaves rustled and out tumbled a small creature. It was vaguely reptilian in looks, with green, scaly skin. There were 2 short, black horns that curved towards the back of its head. It had human-like arms with 5-fingered hands and 2 wings with translucent green membranes stretching across them. It had 2 legs that bent like cat legs, but it could stand on them easily. A short, frilled tail stretched from its lower back, the frill having jagged points that tapered off until the end of the tail. It was currently laughing its ass off at Naruto's expense if the pointing was anything to go by. "Oi, did you throw that rock?" Naruto yelled as he turned his rage on it. They all watched as it sobered and they could finally take in its eyes. Both orbs glowed a brilliant green that was lighter in contrast to its skin. It stood on its back legs and flipped Naruto the bird while blowing a raspberry at him. "Oh, wow," Zatoji said in amazement. "I've never seen one in person before." "Well, it'll probably be the last you see once I'm through skinning it," Naruto stated, calling his morph blade into the form of a Kabar. An angry glare was directed at the laughing little critter, only causing it to laugh more. "But that's what it wants you to do." Zatoji tried to play mediator in the conflict. "If you attack it, it'll be able to cast its illusions on you." Naruto only stared in silence at the creature as it tried to goad him into attacking. "What is it, anyway?" "The rare imp dragon," Zatoji informed him. "They're natural pranksters, causing trouble to just about anyone. They're master illusionists, rivaling spellcasters that specialize in them. They're also gifted with a powerful fire breath. But what makes them dangerous is when they grow up or are imparted some mana from their masters. They can become hellfire drakes. Extremely violent, very ferocious, and will only listen to their masters half the time. But they're well equipped for heavy combat when grown or magically enhanced, said to be able to clash with full-fledged dragons and survive for a while." The group, minus Naruto, had looks of surprise at the information. Who knew that this little creature had so much power within it? But the blonde was having none of it. "Don't care. Gonna make me a new belt." As he swung his Kabar to throw it at the small creature, a cruel smile erupted on the small dragon's face. Its eyes blazed an even brighter green before Naruto was suddenly encapsulated in an empty world. The forest was gone, his group as well, and it was then that he knew he was stuck in an illusion. He had no time to comment on his new situation as he was forced to dodge a large gout of fire erupting to his left. As he slid to a stop, a giant version of the small dragon's face occupied the sky, and it was coming down on his position, mouth wide open to swallow him whole. In response, Naruto's morph blade expanded, becoming a giant Zanbatsu, easily 3 times his own height in blade length alone. He swung the blade in a downward slice, cutting right through the giant face, causing it to dissipate into a green mist. He was forced to dodge once again as the fire started to erupt all around him, coming at different angles. He kept moving, seeing that the imp was trying to catch him in a trap with the flames. He started to gather his own mana, trying to break the hold the illusion had over him. Very briefly, a tear appeared in the black background, showing his group, surrounded by a swirling red barrier being sustained by Sirzex. Rias, Akano, and Kaneko all looked concerned whereas Sirzex looked intrigued. But before he could release himself, the tear was filled back in and a giant, snarling face of the imp spewed a giant cone of fire at the blonde. "Give it up already," Naruto shouted as a wave of water erupted from his hand, the spell being cast through intent alone, lowering the power of the effect, but accomplishing what he set out to do in extinguishing the flames. The cat and mouse game, however, was not given up. For 5 more minutes the conflict between the two kept up. The imp's attacks of fire and illusion were being met with blade and spells by the blonde, blow for blow. Finally, Naruto had had enough. "That's it, asshole, time for you to fry." Suddenly, his mana spiked and all 4 of his wings erupted from his back. A white glow illuminated his body, and his hands were raised above his head, clenched in fists. "Feel my wrath, Stormbringer." A clash of thunder and then immediately, a multitude of white lightning bolts fell from the sky, striking the ground all around Naruto for 50 feet. At about the 8-second mark, the darkness vanished, replaced with the woods and his group of peers. Looking around, he spotted his enemy, currently smoking, but alive. The blonde marched up to the little imp and just stared at it. The small dragon opened its exhausted eyes to see Naruto hovering over it. A full minute passed as Naruto's group watched as the two just stared at each other. Zatoji was silently praying that he wouldn't kill the little guy. The tense atmosphere was broken as a smile stretched across Naruto's face, being mimicked by his opponent. Soon, chuckles could be heard from Naruto and smaller, higher-pitched ones could be heard from the prone familiar. The chuckles became laughter as Naruto lowered his hand to the imp dragon, whose response was to grasp his hand with his smaller one, before a bright flash of light obscured the view the group had of the two. When it died down, Naruto was seen walking back to the group, the small, green dragon standing on his shoulders, its hands fisted into his hair, giving a cocky smirk, all its wounds healed and looking perfectly fine. "Alright," Naruto announced, "now we can go home." Zatoji just laughed uproariously at his statement. Rias started to fawn over him, her devil bat flitting around, chattering with Naruto's imp dragon. Akano laughed into her hand, her trademark, UFUFUFU, denoting her amusement. Kaneko just watched with a small smile, but otherwise, her kitten held her attention. Sirzex was unusually quiet. He watched as Naruto and Rias interacted, and watched as Rias' two peerage members joined their queen, and yet, he said nothing. It was not the first time that he had seen Naruto fight, but it was the first time he had actually watched him fight. His technique was very good, and even with the small amount of spells he had launched, he could see that his mana manipulation was good as well. It showed just how dedicated he had been in his training as well as just how much discipline he actually had. A small smile passed over his lips, as he watched Rias give Naruto a congratulatory hug that lasted longer than two people who were just friends would have. It was then that he could see they both felt something for the other, and his heart dropped a bit. His baby sister was growing up, and ever since Naruto had come along, she hadn't been as needful of her, Oni-chan's, attention. But seeing the way Naruto looked at her, actually seeing it for once, he could see just how much Naruto cared for her. It was how he looked at Grafia. He knew that look well. And it was what really made his heart ache a little bit. He knew what he was going to tell Naruto when they got back was going to hurt his sister. After saying their goodbyes and thanks to Zatoji, Sirzex had warped them back to the Gremory household. Rias had immediately run off to show their parents her familiar, but he held Naruto back from following her. Naruto gave him a suspicious look, but was stopped from questioning the Mao as he gestured for the blonde to follow him. Naruto did so, ending up in the familiar study of Lord Gremory. Sirzex closed the door and gestured to Naruto to take a seat in one of the plush chairs, seating himself in one across from it. Naruto took his seat and then asked Sirzex his question, "What did you pull me away for?" "They've been spotted," was Sirzex's short response as the two locked eyes. One side very serious, the other widened in shock. What? How? Where?" Naruto practically shouted at the Mao. "I just got the report today," Sirzex informed Naruto as he steeped his fingers in front of his face, his elbows on the armrests. "My information network saw two people matching Manato's and Kashi's descriptions in Russia today." Naruto gripped the arms of his chair with an iron grip, squashing the chair's arms between his fingers. His mind reeled from the information. He wanted to race out of the house, go to Russia, and confront his parents. All these years without closure, it was hell on him. "But," Sirzex said, gaining his attention, "I'm more than sure that they've gone off the radar again already. It would be a fool's errand to go after them now, and anyone that I could send would be no match. My hands are tied in this matter. Your parents are dangerous people, you know. Then why tell me this?" Naruto questioned, fury boiling in his veins. Sirzex stood up, his demeanor not betraying his thoughts. "I'm telling you this because you're their son, and not one of my agents. I have no control over them, and I doubt that if you could catch up to them you would be in any danger. I'm giving you this information to do with what you will." But what?" Naruto questioned after the older man had trailed off. But Sirzex turned to face him, his face a mask of what he was really feeling inside. "If you hurt my sister, you will soon find yourself on the run, and I won't lose you." Naruto swallowed hard. In all the times that he and the Mao had butted heads, he had never felt such a cold, menacing aura. He swallowed again. "That's the last thing I want to do. Rias-chan, she's my best friend." Sirzex scoffed. "Please, I may have just noticed it today, but that doesn't mean I'm stupid. I know that you two are more than that. I can see it in the way that you look at her." "I don't care about that." Naruto relaxed after having got caught by the scary powerful man. "Despite our differences, I respect you, Naruto. And though I am loath to admit it, you're perfect for Ria-tan." Naruto blushed a bit at the praise. It was weird coming from the man he had pretty much clashed with from day one of meeting him. Thanks, Searsex. No, 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 the red-haired eccentric scolded. Since I am giving you my blessing, you need to call me Oni-tan. I don't think so, Naruto deadpanned. Searsex pouted, but straightened up. There is one more thing that I need to inform you of, that you should know. Naruto raised his eyebrow at him in askance. Rias has been engaged to Riser Phoenix since before she was born. It was with that statement that Naruto's heart dropped into his stomach. That's all for now. If you enjoyed, then please like, share and do comments.